It's our Peach Bowl preview. I've got some mixed feelings about that. Let's discuss next on this week's edition of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's edition of Michigan Podcast. It's our final one before Michigan concludes the 2018 football season against the Florida Gators in the Peach Bowl later this month. We'll be back on January the 2nd after a bit of a winter's nap. And as we look forward to the bowl game, and we'll get in depth about the game with our good friend Michael Spath coming up here in a few minutes, just a couple things that I've been toying with and thinking about. And I want to know if I'm the only one that's in this predicament, because when I look at the season Michigan had, and I look at where this program is compared to where it was a year ago, where I look at where this program was compared to where it was, 4 years ago before Coach Harbaugh came, I look at the recruiting class that's being assembled, and logistically and logically, I'm like, man, we're in really good shape. If we're at the stage now that we're disappointed after, finishing number 7 in the regular season, that's a first world problem I can live with, right? So logically, the data, and I'm usually driven by data. Logically, the data says that we should be pretty excited right now. Why don't I feel that way? Now, feelings are fine provided they have a merit of truth to them. And so I'm struggling with why my intellect says this program is in a good place and is on the way up, but my intuition is like, maybe this is the highest we can go. I mean, look at the decommitment of Daxton Hill, the highest rated recruit in Michigan's class, flipping to Alabama, shocking everybody over the weekend, including, according to Sam Webb from WTKA and the Michigan Insider, even Alabama insiders were not expecting this flip. Yeah, that's a pretty devastating flip. It's a position that, if there is one position that's a systemic weakness in Don Brown's defense, which sets a lot of people up defensively to shine, it's those safeties who struggle to cover downfield. So that's a guy with his elite athleticism we could use at a position like that and could probably challenge for a starting spot next season. So I feel like devastated by that loss. And yet when I look at Michigan's recruiting class, it looks like we're still on pace to be the top class in the Big Ten this year, even better than Ohio State's. And so I'm like, man, it kind of feels like that's a tough loss. And then I look at the numbers and I'm like, I don't know. I pretty much take a recruiting class like this every year, wouldn't I? You know, that Ohio State loss was just crushing. I mean, it was just the most embarrassing moment I think we've had as fans with an on-field result, at least since I've been around, because of what was at stake and all the hype and all the buildup. And yet, this team still was 10-2. It finished a game and a half above its preseason win total in Las Vegas. Again, it's number 7. We barely had 7 wins last year. We're number 7 in the country now. We might win 11 games. I think it's only happened 11 times in school history. Oh, there's a lot to like there, you know? So my left brain and my right brain is at war. Even the whole players sitting out thing, you know? I mean, intellectually, I'm a capitalist. If a player who is unpaid, if a player wants to maximize and protect his number one asset, which is his physical form, and protect it for the draft, that's called capitalism. On the other hand, you know, capitalism extends to the fans too. And now we're talking a half dozen Michigan players may not play in this game. So, I mean, a Peach Bowl t-shirt costs you and me like $30. Trip to the game is thousands of dollars, you know? So doesn't capitalism, you know, cut both ways for the fans too? And while I love Karan Higdon, the story, as a single dad, his parents moving to Ann Arbor, he's been a great player at Michigan. I don't know, something doesn't, intellectually, I'm just really rooting for him and I want him to get paid. But it kind of feels like a Michigan team captain sitting out a bowl game. Really? A captain? And I'm like this way with the football program comprehensively. Like the award celebration we just had. 26 awards. Why don't we just give everybody a participation trophy? I mean, 26 internal awards. Does any other program give out 26 awards to players? I doubt it. And when you factor in how many guys are nominated for those awards, pretty much every guy on the team was nominated for something. Nobody sucked? Nobody? Really? On the other hand, I look at the effort these guys put in. Look at the conditioning improvement. I mean, look at the pictures before and after Ben Herbert. You don't get that with a half-ass commitment. I mean, those guys are working it. Well, many of the rest of us are schlepping it and packing on the pounds. Those guys are pounding away in the gym. You know, they're playing a game where at any moment whatsoever, they risk a Mackenzie Milton-esque injury at any point in time, or Jake Butt for that matter. So who cares if you give a few extra awards to those guys, not even mentioning the academic rigors of being at a school like Michigan on top of what's demanded of you athletically at the same time. And again, I have this constant conflict. I'm like Harvey Two-Face over here, flipping a maize and blue coin up in the air. And if you ask me on any given day, I'm cynical or optimistic. I'm wondering, am I alone? I wonder if you're going to comment on our show today and this week, I'd love to know in our comments section, are you feeling this left brain, right brain conflict with Michigan football? And is it as simple as this is what happens when you go 15 years without winning a Big Ten championship and beating your rival in any meaningful way? This is, even though you're doing a lot of other things right, you failed the final exam again. And so the reason there's so much confusion is because there is a lack of fulfillment, meaning a lot of things are happening, but what needs to happen the most is not. Am I the only one as we go into this new year and as we look ahead to the last game of the year, am I the only one in this constant state of conflict about Michigan football? What say you? Wanted to say thank you to all of you that have supported us on Patreon all year long. Your support means a lot. We try to give you as much extra content as we can. You'll be getting some extra content while we're off during the holidays, in fact. And The main thing you guys have done is you've made it possible for me to convince our producer, Aaron, to keep doing this because thanks to your support on Patreon, he got a nice little Christmas bonus this year. So thank you to all of you that are supporting us. I get asked all the time, hey, what can we do to be supportive of what you guys are putting together? We're huge fans of your podcast every week. Support us. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And from the bottom of our cotton picking maize and blue hearts, as Bob Ufer used to say, thank you to all of you that have been supporting us throughout the past year. Merry Christmas. Go Blue. All right, back here on Michigan Podcast and joined again this week by my partner over at Wolverine Digest from WTKA in Ann Arbor. Michael Spath is here with us on Michigan Podcast. Go Blue. Michael, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. I want to do a deep dive previewing this Peach Bowl against Florida. But before we get there, I opened up the show talking about this. I'm in this constant state of conflict with Michigan football, and I've tried to wrestle with it internally, and I just decided to just kind of bare my soul with our audience and find out if I'm the only one. And here's the thing with me. When I look at the data points I tend to care about the most, the progress the program has made under Jim Harbaugh, we're number 7 in the country. Even with Daxton Hill's loss, we're looking at a recruiting class, particularly if you're looking at finishing with Caleb Deloach, Trevor Keegan, Cornelius Johnson. I think those are all, Zach Harrison. I don't know if they'll get all those guys. It's realistic that they could. I think we take that class pretty much every single season. That's going to be the number 1 class in the Big Ten. So I look at a lot of these metrics and I'm like, man, we're in a pretty good spot. And yet, I don't feel like that. No, you know me, I'm not necessarily a touchy-feely kind of guy. So my intuition is at war with my intellect. And I'm wondering, does it just come down to a lack of fulfillment from not beating Ohio State or winning the Big Ten in 15 years? Is that really the crux here? Is that what's causing my left brain and right brain to go to war with each other right now? And are you experiencing any of this, Michael?
I definitely am. And I tell you what, Steve, I think what it comes down to is every time I get really excited about the Michigan program, we just seem to get that punch in the gut, right? I mean, and no offense to, you're right. Like if you got those 4 kids, as you just mentioned, including Zach Harrison, like that's a good day. That's a great recruiting class. That's a really good day to be a Michigan football fan on signing day. But it really just comes back to that Ohio State game, and not the Ohio State game alone, but losing by 30 points and feeling like you're not any closer. And so, I've been having this argument with myself, Steve, in a slightly different vein. And I know that you listen to the show, and so you know where I'm kind of going with this. But for the listeners out there, for me, I have changed my expectations. And we discussed this a lot on the show this week, is, Michigan is not a national championship program. It really hasn't been. Over the last 60 years, I think Zach looked this up, over the last 60 years, you'd have 10 times where Michigan finished in the top 4 in the press, where they would have, and it would have been in the college football playoff. So that's once every 6 years. Out of those 60 years, Michigan has won 1 national championship. They're not a team they're not a national championship caliber program, and that is not really necessarily a bad thing. It just means that in today's college football world, where everything is about the semifinals, making the college football playoffs, as Michigan fans, we might just have to readjust our expectations a little bit, and that is, hey, look, beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten, but that might be the ceiling on this program. Nick Saban, until Nick Saban retires, until Dabo Swinney retires, until the Big Ten East gets easier, there's a lot of reasons why Michigan is not going to be this perennial national championship contender. And so I'm kind of wrestling with that, Steve. I think what you said about this lack of fulfillment, I think it comes down to the fact that, after Michigan got on their roll, you and I and a lot of Michigan fans got hell-bent on this idea that what are we going to measure as a successful season now? And it was no longer beating Michigan State. Michigan State is a 7-5 football team. Wisconsin's a 7-5 football team. Even, vanquishing Penn State after getting spanked by them a year ago, certainly that helped. But we started saying, like, okay, for this year to be a successful season, and for about a month, we did this to ourselves where you had to beat Ohio State, you had to go to the Big Ten championship game, and then when you didn't have that happen, and you didn't have it happen in the fashion in which Michigan lost that game, you're just left going, well, what did we accomplish? What was so special about this year? And so by us getting all hyped and amped up for this one specific result, I mean, it's, a little bit, talking to my wife, and my wife was up for a big job promotion, and she has gotten a raise like every year for the past 4 years. She's doing really well. She's very well respected, but she didn't get the huge new job promotion she was expecting. And she came to me and she's like, same type of thing. She's like almost distraught. And I'm trying to say, well, look at what you've done. Look at how much better your life is every year. Look how much respect you're getting from your colleagues. But she's distraught because she got her in her head that there was only one thing that was going to make her happy. And as Michigan fans, we got it in our head over the last 6 weeks leading up to that Ohio State game. There was only one thing that was going to make us happy this year, and that was beating Ohio State and go to the Big Ten championship. And so now we're left with what is the leftovers of that, and trying to make sense of, well, is there anything that happened this season that really makes us happy? I don't know. I haven't reconciled to the point of being happy with the season. I'm still trying. I'm in the aftermath of that Ohio State loss, and maybe we'll get there if they win the bowl game. They get to 11 wins. But no, I'm right there with you, Steve. That I feel like Michigan hasn't accomplished anything, and yet I know that that's ridiculous.
I wonder. Michigan's considered one of, if not the best, public university in the United States academically. It has, high standards for athletes, but it's not Stanford or Duke or even Notre Dame. It's made some accommodations in recent years that it wasn't willing to make in the past. But still, this is not a football factory like what you would see in the Southeastern Conference stereotypically, for example, where the academic community is in subservience to the football program. It's more symbiotic and complementary there. And you could probably speak to that. I'm sure you could better than me, being an alum and living in Ann Arbor. And I bring that up in this context. Notre Dame, stringent academic standards. Brian Kelly's in his 8th year. This is the first time they've made the playoff. He had 2 other seasons where he went into November with a chance at the playoff and couldn't get it done, just like Jim has had 2 seasons where he went into November and had a chance at the playoff and couldn't get it done. They did make one BCS title game in his 3rd year, and they lost. I think Eddie Lacy might have just actually scored another touchdown from what I remember about that game. You look at Stanford. Yeah. Jim had one team there that it was debatable whether them or Oregon should have been in the playoff that year, or should have been in the BCS that year, and Oregon went instead. David Shaw's had a lot of success with Jim's program, but really only one season was David Shaw's team considered a serious contender for national honors in November. A lot of those seasons are 9-3, 10-3, 11-2 kind of years when you look at David Shaw's record. And I wonder if we're going to have certain schools that play 8 conference games instead of 9, so they are scheduling, the team we're playing in our bowl game, they played 2 FCS opponents. Penn State has the same record. They didn't get a New Year's 6 bid because maybe if they had played 2 FCS opponents, they would be in the big New Year's 6. So when you've got certain universities willing to do certain things like that, and to essentially tell the academic community, you're here in order to be the support staff for the athletics, and Michigan's just never going to do that. Given those inherent disadvantages, is it just not realistic to think you're going to be able? Imagine in the NFL if it was easier for one team to draft players than you. And they got to draft, and they got to choose their own schedule and play one less game against a good team than you, right? What would be the odds you get home field advantage and go to the Super Bowl over them? They'd be a lot lower. We're kind of looking at the same situation. Are these things, as Michigan fans, we need to consider that we just are fans of a school that is just never going to, it will make some accommodations, but it's never going to sell its soul to win at this level, and you're just not going to consistently beat teams that do. Should we just come to grips with that?
I think, honestly, that's a question that every Michigan fan has to ask themselves is are they willing to understand that? And, when you mentioned Notre Dame is in the college football semifinals this year, I think of like Notre Dame as essentially what Michigan is going to hope to be, and what that is a anomaly random program that is in the national championship college football playoffs once every 2 or 3 years. Because for the most part, and we talked about this on our show, and we have a guy named Bill Bender on our show from Sporting News every Wednesday, and he ranks. He's done this for like 3 or 4 years in a row now, where he ranks the teams that have a realistic chance of making the college football playoff. And every year, 3 or 4 of those teams are exactly the same, and it's Alabama, and it's Clemson, and it's Oklahoma. You can kind of quasi throw Georgia in that mix, and Ohio State. And so then you've got these five teams right there. And then he generally has 3 or 4 teams in addition to that change in any given season based off of who's coming back, based off of the schedule that they play. And that's kind of where Michigan finds itself. I don't think there is a world that exists in today's college football in a 4-team format, and what those, the recruiting, the aspects you talked about there with academics, whether or not there's impropriety going on, but at the very least with the migration of recruits down to the southeastern areas. Michigan is not a hotbed for recruiting. Ohio is, and Pennsylvania is still pretty good, but for the most part, like, the best kids aren't coming out of the Midwest. And so I think you're looking at Michigan being one of those schools that's on the periphery, probably consistently on the periphery, but more in that 7, 8, 9 range, where they are hoping that they're in Notre Dame once every 4 or 5 years, getting into that discussion, getting into the playoff, but not a perennial team. And even when you get there, is there anybody right now that thinks Notre Dame has a chance in hell of winning this national championship? And the answer is no. Nobody's picking Notre Dame to win the national championship. Nobody's picking Notre Dame to get past their first round game. And that's kind of where, when you look at Ohio State has gotten to the national semifinals, besides the year that they won it, they got there the next year and they got absolutely thumped by Clemson. Michigan State has been to the national semifinals and got destroyed by Alabama. And this is the best that's coming out of the Big Ten. So if Michigan's the best that comes out of the Big Ten in any given year, maybe that's their ceiling, is getting the college football playoff, but that's it. And it's only going to happen once every, maybe once a decade, maybe once every 6 to 8 years, where they're actually going to be in that position. And so I think that is a reality that every Michigan fan has to kind of wake up to. And, if you can sit there and go like, well, that's not acceptable to me. And I was kind of that way, but the more and more that it comes across, the more and more that we learn, the more and more I talk to educated people such as yourself, Steve, the more and more that's just what this college football world is right now. And until Nick Saban retires, that's kind of the world that we're all going to be stuck in. It's a little bit like when Urban Meyer retired the other day. All of a sudden, Ohio State and beating them became an option. Until he retired, I don't know that beating Ohio State was a realistic option for this program. But now that he's retired, you could look at the surface, the tilting a little bit, but as long as Nick Saban is at Alabama, I don't think this thing changes very much.
Let's get to the Peach Bowl, Michael Spath, and you look at this game. What I find fascinating is it looks like we're looking at Devin Bush, Rashawn Gary, Karan Higdon not playing in the game, maybe David Long, Lavert Hill not playing in the game. Florida's got a couple of players, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, was it Polite is his name, Ja'Kai Polite, who is projected to be a first-round pick, Martez Ivy. They've got several guys going off to the draft as well. We're not hearing anything about their guys going off to the draft, not playing in the game, which I find odd. All right, so I'm torn on the impact those guys if all those guys don't play. I'm torn on the impact of this game, and here's why. Because I could make a case that if those guys have already let it be known that they're out and they're not going to play, well, you've got those 15 bowl practices. Any coach I've ever interacted with has always told me this is when you see young players make their biggest jump is in these bowl practices, because most of the year you don't get a chance to really work with them because you're preparing the guys that play for game day. All right. So they make a huge leap and it's like an extra spring practice. That really means you're also getting a jump on what next year's team is going to look like. And, it's like the line from the Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. I mean, if this is going to be next year's team, let's get him some extra 15 practices and put him in a game on national TV rather than waiting until August 31st to find out what they can do, right? Let's get some film and let them, have an off season to look at it and see what happens when they get their feet wet. It also, I think, because these guys are all on defense except for Karan, it forces us to alter our offensive approach because Florida's defense is not as good as it was a year ago. It's still pretty good, though. And without the bell cow running back that we can hand the ball, put the ball in his belly 25, 30 times a game, we're going to have to use those 3 NFL-looking wide receivers that we barely throw the ball to. We're going to have to turn number 2 there at the bottom corner of your screen. He's going to have to throw the ball more than Wisconsin throws, which he didn't during the regular season, because we're probably not winning this game 17-10. They're going to get it. Dan Mullen's too good of an offensive coach not to take advantage of some blown assignments from all these young guys playing, right? So we're going to probably have to score 21, 24, 28 points to win this game. So I think this kind of looks a lot like what next season's going to look like, assuming Shea comes back, and I think that he will. So I could actually make his case that if we're going to play in a game that's not for, a championship of any kind, maybe we're better off with those guys going and just go ahead and put next year's team in right now and give them like an extra game to get ready. What do you think?
No, I honestly, I agree. And I think the Karan Higdon one especially is very interesting to me. And I'm a huge Karan Higdon fan, and I really love who this kid is and what he has done rushing for close to 1,200 yards as a senior. I saw that he's, pretty high up in the draft rankings among running backs, according to Mel Kiper. I'm really excited for him. And you're right. If you take him off, who on this in this running game can get the ball for 20 to 25 times and run between the tackles? And the answer is nobody. And so you're going to be forced to use Chris Evans, hopefully the way that he's designed to be used, and that is in the passing game. And True Wilson is a guy that you can use on third down. He's a guy that can get you a couple of carries on first and second down. But I would really be excited about it. And I tell you what, it's an opportunity for this Michigan coaching staff to showcase what an offense could look like in 2019. My fear, Steve, is that Karan Higdon doesn't play and Chris Evans gets the ball 25 times between the tackles, and you and I just want to run right into a wall. And so that'd be my fear. I don't think it's going to happen, or at least I'm dreaming it's not going to happen. But we shall see. On defense, I think on defense is a little bit of a different animal. If you've got Rashawn Gary out, we saw Joshua Uche and Kwity Paye.
By the way, Michigan's 3 best defensive performances of the year on the Revenge Tour, Rashawn Gary didn't play in any of those games.
True. But you take Devin Bush off the field and you take 1 or 2 of those cornerbacks, and I tell you the other thing, I don't know how you're going to play man-to-man defense if you've got your best man-to-man defense guys off the field. You'd be far better off playing in some type of zone, and so that's what you'd hope to see. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities for this Michigan team to evolve on both sides of the ball if some of these guys don't play. So that is exciting for me, and I want to see a win. Look, I mean, when they lost to Florida State in 2016, that end of the season sucked, and that end of the season really put a damper on the rest of the year. People look back and say, "Oh, they went 10-3, and it was year 2 and the whole thing." But come on, I mean, they went 1-3 down the stretch. They lost to Ohio State. They lost their bowl game. I mean, that was a really disappointing end of the year. In fact, I took my grade from giving them something like an A- to probably giving them like a C+ with the way that they performed down the stretch. You don't want to have that happen again. It's always more fun to be in an off season after you've won your last game than when you've lost your last game. And so this is a big opportunity for Michigan, and I'm right there with you. I'm excited to see what the offense and defense look like because of some of the personnel changes they're going to be faced with.
By the way, final thing, couple notes on Florida. They played 2 FCS opponents. Felipe Frake's QBR this year for the season is 76, which is about 8 points less than Shea Patterson's. But when you take away the 2 games he played against FCS opponents, his QBR for the season is 59. Those 2 FBS opponents averaged over 180 yards rushing on Florida. So keep in mind, Florida's rush defense, I think, is 70th in the country, and that was with playing 2 FCS foes. So the thing, I don't know, if I were Karan Higdon's agent, I might have told him, dude, go out there and rush for 200 yards right before the college football playoff games against that Florida defense, but because they give up a lot of rushing yards. That would have been a potential highlight tape for him. But what's your prediction on the game?
My prediction on the game is, it really does depend on how many guys are out, and it depends on whether or not this Michigan coaching staff comes out and pulls the Capital One Bowl Florida contest that Lloyd Carr did in his final game. I suspect that we won't see the offense and defense that we want to see, but I think Florida's kind of a paper line, honestly. And I think unless Michigan has 6 guys out of this game, and there's a couple of surprises that we don't see coming, I think Michigan wins this one in a close one, something like 28-24 or close to that.
Yeah, I think more points are going to be scored than most suspect. Because I think with the young player or the young players Michigan's going to be forced to play on defense, they're going to have to score more points than they had to against some of those teams in the Big Ten. Michael, it's been great having you with us again in 2018. We'll talk to you again in January. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, brother. See you then. Okay.
Yeah, thanks to you. Have a great holiday with your family. Really enjoy doing this every single week. A lot of catharsis and a lot of good. I think we did a great job. Really presenting a side of the analysis that you don't get everywhere. So really appreciate it. I think the Michigan podcast is doing a great job.
Thank you, man. Go Blue. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
So we're off after this episode here at Michigan Podcast. We're back on January the 3rd, but you know what? Head over to Wolverine Digest. Because I'm off work for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff on Michigan and Big Ten related sports, football and basketball. I'm going to be posting almost all of it at Wolverine Digest, where you can go and read stuff, not just from me, but our entire team, including Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor. And one of the things I love about our website is that little scroll there on the right, where we can keep you up to date constantly with the latest breaking news involving Michigan athletics. So check us out. Hey, if you're going to miss the podcast for the next few weeks, if you've never checked us out before, for example, scroll down there to the second story. What if the Big Ten had no divisions? I went and took a look at what if the Big Ten had no divisions during this championship game era? Would that really have helped the league make the college football playoffs more often? You want to read that research? We're going to do a lot of cool stuff like that. WolverineDigest.com. It'll tide you over while we're on Christmas break here at the Michigan Podcast. WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, will Michigan beat Florida in the Peach Bowl? 73% of you said yes. I wonder if you knew Michigan might be without up to a half dozen starters, if the answer would still be overwhelmingly so one-sided. But that could very well be the case coming up when the game kicks off later this month. This week's question of the week, the Bow Hunter says, agree or disagree? The biggest play in Michigan's season was Maryland's failed two-point conversion. That's one of those things you don't want to be true, because the more and more you think about it, painfully, you realize that it probably is. I'll say this, I don't know if it was the biggest play. It was as big of a play as there was in Michigan's football season. No question about it. I mean, Maryland hits that two-point conversion. Think about it. Maryland hits that two-point conversion, they win the game. Michigan goes to Indianapolis. It doesn't matter if Ohio State scores 82 points. Michigan goes to Indianapolis, probably beats Northwestern, wins the Big Ten championship, and goes to the Rose Bowl and has 11 wins right now, right? So some of that consternation that we're confused and, conflict that was raging, we talked about at the beginning of the show this week, some of that absolutely, at the very least, subsides. At least subsides. All right, man, we come to the end, and ladies, we've come to the end of Michigan Podcast for 2018. Yes, I keep getting asked. We will be here in January. We'll be here throughout the basketball season as well. We got the number one team in the country, according to the only rankings that matter. Of course, we're going to be doing Michigan Podcast to follow John Beeline's crew and all of the offseason football developments as well. Thank you to all of you that watch this. Hey, if you could leave us a comment and a like here on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. Same thing on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play. If you could subscribe and leave us 5-star reviews, we would greatly appreciate it. We do this for you, the people. That's right, Gotham. That's a terrible band voice, I know. But thank you so much for all of you that help us out and are the reason we do this and make it possible and watch and listen each week. Thank you to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for helping to spread the word as well. Everybody have a great New Year. Merry Christmas. Go Blue. Hopefully we will see you after a Peach Bowl victory on January 2nd.